guards pinning me to the ground, twisted off the collar of my shirt and choked off my airway. And eventually, he choked me to the point of unconsciousness.
Envision yourself in a cell, no bigger than your bathroom, with no visitors and the worst rules you can imagine. There are rumors that Japanese jails make Alcatraz seem like a resort. Well, we know that the Japanese are not easy on crime, but to truly find out how much they despise criminals, you have to look no further than their prison. Let us take a quick glance back at the history of Japan's correctional system before we dive into modern jails. The Japanese judicial system has been in existence for centuries and has changed significantly over the years. There was a major shift towards more modern jail facilities during the Meiji era in the late 19th century, but harsh discipline was maintained throughout. Japanese jail culture is very different from that of many other countries. Inmates are subject to rigid rules and regulations under Japan's prison system. The slightest offense, such as looking at a guard, can result in severe corporal punishment. Inmates in Japanese prisons sleep on Japanese futons and sit on tatami mats on the floor, both of which are traditional elements of Japanese design. Both Western-style rooms with beds and Japanese-style solitary cells are possible for international prisoners. The only time detainees are allowed to speak is when they are questioned directly. Additionally, the daily caloric intake required for survival is calculated into meal plans. Japanese prison policy prioritizes work practices as a means of rehabilitating inmates and achieving the policy's main goal of instilling discipline in detainees. In Japan, offenders are encouraged to use their time constructively by manufacturing items such as furniture and clothing. Inmates have access to educational and vocational programs while being incarcerated. They must remain in these programs until their sentences are up, allowing them to learn marketable skills that will help them find work after their release. Even offenders who have not completed high school have the opportunity to continue their education within the Japanese prison system. Inmates are less likely to relapse in this system compared to some Western systems because of the challenging environment, which promotes a sense of engagement and accomplishment. Research conducted by the Japanese Ministry of Justice indicates a significant drop in the jail population. For the first time in over 2 decades, the number of incarcerated people in the United States dipped below 50,000 at the end of 2019. At the end of October 2019, there were only 48,802 people behind bars. The total number of detainees housed in Japan prisons in 2019 was around 48.4 thousand, down significantly from the previous year's figure of more than 50.5 thousand inmates. From 2010 to 2019, the incarcerated population of Japan amounts to 38.4 people for every 100,000 residents of the country. As a result, the prison population has been decreasing, reflecting the country's focus on rehabilitation and effective reintegration. Now let's take a look at some famous Japanese prisons. Fuchu Prison in Tokyo is one of Japan's oldest and most infamous jails. It was founded in the Meiji period and has been used to confine some of Japan's most renowned criminals. 2 uniformed but unarmed prison guards watch over the entrance to the 42-acre facility, which is surrounded by a concrete fence that is 16 feet high. There are a few towers outside, but none of the 412 guards or wardens responsible for the safety of roughly 2,500 male convicts are armed. Fuchu, along with Japan's other 58 prisons, has a remarkably low rate of prison break attempts and riots. It's not always easy to tell the guards from the convicts. The inmates' crew cuts are hidden under caps that match the guards, and both groups dress similarly. The only noticeable difference is the convicts' brown uniforms and the guards' dark green ones. Japanese inmates, in contrast to American inmates, don't wear serial numbers on their shirts, but rather little nameplates attached to their breast pockets. The jail administration at Fuchu is very rigorous. No matter how hot it gets, inmates are not allowed to remove the collars from their prison clothes. No wall-based graffiti is allowed under any circumstances. Penalties for breaking prison regulations range from having male privileges canceled to being forced to attend what the guards call penitent sessions. A senior Fuchu official has communicated that inmates who engage in serious misconduct may be placed in isolation cells for several weeks so that they can reflect on their mistakes. In addition to following the rules of obedience and good behavior, inmates are also required to work for 44 hours per week. Inmates at Fuchu can choose from 21 different workshops to acquire skills like auto repair, leatherworking, and woodworking. Japanese prisoners typically sleep on the floor in large dormitory-style dorms with up to 10 other detainees. 2 hours after dinner, inmates in shared cells have access to a small black and white TV that they can control with a remote. Inmates can keep up to 10 books in their cells, but the prisoner censors will not allow any pornographic or exciting literature. Prisoners from other countries are housed in individual cells in a special wing of the prison just for them, and each cell has its own bed. Radio speakers play recorded shows from the American Military Forces Far East Network, as there are no televisions in these individual cells. Because the Japanese make no distinction between countries, foreign convicts are also fed in communal dining halls. This is why all inmates at Fuchu receive the same foreigner supper from the prison kitchen. Doesn't seem that bad, right? Well then, let us tell you about Tokyo Detention House and what Carlos Ghosn had to face after he was caught for underreporting his income. With an astounding 99% conviction rate for charged detainees and one of Japan's 7 execution cells locked away in its murky basement, the Tokyo Detention House is a fearsome institution. Life in this bleak atmosphere is severe, with no place for compassion. Many people assumed that Ghosn, a 64-year-old executive back then, would be transferred to a more lenient white-collar facility due to the seriousness of the formal charge against him, which is that he underreported his income by 5 billion yen, 44 million USD, over a period of 5 years until 2015. As a result, he was placed in a cell with no amenities, including just a cold, hard stool, a primitive toilet, and a small sink, all packed into a space no bigger than 5 square meters, or around 3 tatami mats. The prosecutors have such a firm hold on him that they can question him at any time, even when his lawyers aren't there. In most cases, high-profile prisoners like Ghosn are kept in separate, isolated cells while the cells around them remain unoccupied. Inmates are awakened at 7 a.m. and the lights are turned off at 9 p.m., establishing a strict regimen throughout the day. His every motion is tracked by cameras so that he doesn't get comfortable, do any kind of physical activity, or even slumps while sitting on the stool. Infractions of these regulations are met with severe penalties, such as time spent in padded isolation chambers while being forced to hold stressful positions with their hands shackled. Ghosn has lost about 10 kilos, or 22 pounds in weight, while in jail as a result of the inadequate food supplies he has been given. Only once or twice a month will you be treated to a slice of bread at mealtime, and the rice you will eat will be blended with about 3 parts barley. This time of year in Tokyo, temperatures average around 5 degrees Celsius, leaving him shivering and causing him to moan about the cold to his loved ones. A jacket has been handed to him in reaction to the bitter cold, however, its usefulness is debatable. The facility's central inspection hub is modeled after the panopticon, but the cold cells where inmates like Ghosn are held don't often benefit from the heating that's provided there. Notorious individuals have also left their imprint within the Tokyo Detention House. Aum Shinrikyo members, notorious for their 1995 sarin nerve gas attack on the Tokyo subway, were also residents. On July 6 of last year, the facility's basement served as the grisly setting for the execution of the mastermind, Shoko Asahara. 20 days later, co-conspirator Kenichi Hirose was executed alongside the 6 other criminals who had been sentenced to their demise in 2018. These people met their demise in a room with a terrifying trapdoor in a long drop gallows. A red square indicates the location of the trapdoor below the convict's feet within the solemn chamber. 3 switches are pressed simultaneously by different prison officers on the other side of the partition wall to preserve anonymity. The horrifying tribute to the gravity of the proceedings within the Tokyo Detention House. None of them will ever know for sure if they have triggered the release of the trapdoor. The Japanese penal system has a long list of accomplishments to its name, including low incarceration rates, low rates of violence and contraband within prisons, and low overcrowding. Human rights activists, however, say that the system's success is at the expense of its citizens due to its draconian restrictions and strict regimentation. Human Rights Watch's prison expert Joanne Mariner sees the Japanese method as exhibiting dictatorial tendencies, being driven by a concern with rules and rigorous obedience. Inmates are subject to arbitrary punishments when they are deemed to have broken any of these guidelines. For its detractors, the system is eerily reminiscent of the 19th century belief that American captives were slaves of the state. Former and current inmates alike have taken notice of the conditions and are increasingly trying to sue the jail administration for abuse. Mr. Mara, an American spending time in a Japanese prison for importing marijuana into the country, has also sued the Japanese government for damages totaling almost $90,000. Many inmates do their time in prison without incident, and some experts believe this is because they are afraid of being punished for disobeying the laws. Hitotsubashi University Law School Dean Toshikuni Murai, who has traveled extensively and visited jails around the world, claims that Japanese prison discipline is the strictest he has seen. Despite the lack of walls and armed guards, convicts are denied basic rights, including the ability to file appeals or even speak to one another during work. However, Japanese authorities argue that the prison system's rigorous restrictions are necessary to impose discipline and educate inmates on the necessity of adhering to societal standards, with the ultimate goal of reducing the likelihood of future legal problems. They argue that there is a fine balance that must be maintained by the system in order to achieve both order and rehabilitation. The strict standards in Japanese jail also discourage convicts from banding together to cause trouble. Convicts are less likely to be violently or brutally assaulted by other convicts in this setting.